Hey guys, it's Dave coming to you from the Hobo Dojo, and I just wanted to weigh in a little bit on the Chris Cuomo thing. Normally I don't try to catch up on these up-to-the-minute news stories, but I'll make an exception here. So I'm going to play a clip, and if anybody has children in the room or particularly tender sensibilities, please check out of this video because Chris Cuomo... I think he says the F word maybe like, I don't know, 36 times. I didn't count. It was a lot. So if that's going to bother you, please don't watch, okay? Okay, let's listen.
I thought that's who you were.
No, punk-ass bitches from the right call me Fredo. My name is Chris Cuomo. I'm an anchor on CNN. Fredo is from the Godfather. He was that weak brother. And they use it as an Italian aspersion. Any of you Italian? Are you Italian? It's a fucking insult to your people. It's an insult to your fucking people. It's like the N-word for us. Wow. Is that a cool fucking thing?
You're a much more reasonable guy in person than you seem to be on television.
Yeah, but if you want to play, then we'll fucking play. If you got something you want to say about what I do on television, then say it. But don't call me a fucking insult.
Hey, listen.
What?
I don't want any problems.
Yeah, you're going to have a big fucking problem.
What's the problem?
It's a little different on TV. Don't fucking insult me like that.
I didn't insult you.
Fuck, you call me Fredo. It's like I call you punk bitch. You like that? You want that to be your nickname?
I didn't call you that.
You called me Fredo. You know my name's not fucking Fredo.
I thought your name was.
You did not think my name was fucking Fredo. Don't be a liar. You want to be a man, stand up like a man.
I'm standing up, man.
You want to be a man, I'm here. Then fucking own it. Then own what you said.
Hey.
Then own what you said.
Listen, man, I don't have a problem with you, man.
Yeah, you're going to have a fucking problem.
What? What are you going to do about it?
I'll fucking ruin your shit. I'll fucking
something.
throw you down these stairs like a fucking punk.
Please do.
Why, so you can fucking sue? So you can fucking sue?
Well, why don't you do it?
Go take a swing. You want to call me Fredo? Take a fucking swing.
I'm not going to swing.
Take a fucking swing. Watch your fucking hands. Take a swing. Watch your fucking hands. Take a swing. No, come on, boy. Come on, boy. You want to call me shit? Call me shit then.
Hey, listen, man.
I'm right fucking
I'm not
here.
doing anything.
I'll fucking wreck your shit. I'll fucking wreck your shit.
Stop.
You didn't know what you were doing when
I
you
thought
called
it
me
was your
Fredo?
name, man.
You didn't know.
I thought it was your name.
You didn't know, right? Hey, you didn't know what you were saying, right?
I thought it was his name.
I'm breaking it up.
All right, so let's remember who Chris Cuomo is. He's clearly a left-winger. He is the son of the first woke mayor of, not mayor, but governor of New York, Mario Cuomo, who is known to be sort of a new man kind of guy. And so that's Mario Cuomo, much beloved for his feminist sensibilities and up-to-the-minute liberal stances on issues. And, of course, now the current mayor, current governor, I don't know why I keep saying mayor, but the current governor of New York is Andrew Cuomo. Andrew Cuomo is Chris Cuomo's brother. All right, and they, I guess they came from Queens, like somebody else that we're aware of, and they went to good schools, boarding schools, or good private schools, like somebody else that we're aware of. And here he is showing his Queens roots. Now, if there's a more anti-Donald Trump guy in the media than Chris Cuomo, I'm unaware of him. Of course, generally the entire media is anti-Trump, but certainly Chris Cuomo is. And generally they really, the original disgust at Donald Trump was because he was supposedly toxically masculine. I mean, his fights with Rosie O'Donnell, his thing with Billy Bush, where he talked about the things that were offered to a man of his standing by certain types of gold digger type women. And he talked about how he came on to women and things. It was a guy talk between guys who thought they were off camera, or at least he did, thought he was off the record, and talking about the stuff that guys talk about. It's rude, it's crude, it's New York dudes hanging out being dudes, right? Well, what we now have is we have a whole bunch of people on the left who say that they are so against this. These are guys who, through college, posed as feminists because they knew that would open doors for them. And the ones who got sort of famous or got well known got locked into these stances. these feminist stances where I'd never think of a woman in terms of, as a sex object or as being any different than a man. I mean, at first I would just respect her and, oh, look, it so happens that she's pretty and it so happens that we have a good sex life. It was just, it started with mutual respect. And had nothing to do with the male-female thing. And I object very strongly to that sort of toxic masculinity. I've made a couple of notes here. Let me just take a quick look at here. But this is what happens. You end up with guys like Alec Baldwin, just ripping on people and with all kinds of sexist language coming out and all sorts of calling people fags and things like that. I think he did that. But let's be specific to something that I do know about, where you'll see sort of homophobic language and sexist language being used. In this video, Cuomo calls the guy a punk ass bitch. You know what I mean? And he refers to all the guys on the right as punk-ass bitches. And so what is a bitch? A bitch is a female, right? And a punk-ass bitch would be a guy who's feminine, who's not masculine. So that's the ultimate, that's the first knee-jerk sort of insult that he gives to a guy, is that a guy would be acting feminine. So how is that feminist? How is that a pro-woman statement? And what about the Stephen Colbert and the thing calling Donald Trump a cockholster? Excuse the language. That wasn't my language. For Vladimir Putin. What is that if not a homophobic remark? How can you insult a straight man by calling him gay unless you think that being gay is something to be embarrassed about and ashamed of? So this is product placement, people, in case you've never seen this move done before. So you're calling you're calling a guy gay. I hear my friends on the left call Donald Trump a C sucker all the time, and you know what I mean by the C word. I'm sorry, that's just saying that he's a guy that engages in homosexual sex. And you're using that as the worst comment, the worst sort of insult you can come up with at the time. When those guys took over that game preserve, the Ammon Bundy, I think it was, they took over this game preserve in Oregon because they were it was a protest about water rights and things like that and what the EPA was doing to people. I'm a little unsure about the exact charges, but these guys were holed up in a game preserve in Oregon for a while, and they were seen as being people on the right, and so they began to be sent dildos in the mail. It was a whole thing on the left. You saw it all over Facebook. Yeah, mail those guys a dildo, and I'm thinking that's completely homophobic. That is that's saying, oh, I'm going to shame you with the worst thing I can think of. You strong, straight men, I'm going to shame you by implying that you're gay. And so, I mean, these things are really weird. This is the kind of stuff that happens when men hide their masculinity, when they don't feel comfortable with just being masculine. See, conservatives don't have this problem. We're just guys. We know that guys are different than women. And when I'm being a guy, and then we hang around with women, and they push back organically against us if we get too guyish, like we're watching too many ball games, or we're going fishing with the guys too much, or we're using the F word too often. They push back against us and go, hey, come on, calm down. But they do it from a place of a female who understands a male, and we go, okay, yeah, got it. I'll wind that down a little bit. But we conservatives, we never have to pretend to be just like women. We don't have to do that. We know it's not true. We know it's false. They know it's false, the guys on the left, but that's what they do their whole lives. They come through college that way, and it's a game they have to play. And I myself was young. When I was young, I grew up in a completely feminist environment. You know, once I hit high school. And so all the things I'd learned about being a guy went out the window. And I had to, oh my God, I can't, all the things that I feel about women and that my sense of attractiveness to them and how I want to, be protective of them and impress them and all the different things that I was prepared to do in order to woo the women that I found attractive, I wasn't able to do anymore because that would be seen as disrespectful to women. I had to treat them as if they were just exactly the same thing as guys. It was very, very confusing. Eventually I got over it. But as I got over it, I became more conservative. It was these things are linked together because conservatism is based on human nature. It's based on, okay, what's the best way that we can take human nature, which we know is there, and masculinity, which we know has its dark side. How can we best manage this? So I'm writing a piece on this, so I don't want to give away the whole thing. I think it's going to be called something like We're Losing Our Boys or The Trouble with Boys or something like that. That's coming out soon. You'll watch for that. You'll know it when you see it. But I just find this to be really hilarious every time one of these guys who is very clearly the non-Donald Trump, sees himself as the anti-Donald Trump, comes out with a burst like this, which is way more toxic masculinity, which is way more an example of toxic masculinity than anything Donald Trump's ever done. As far as we know, I mean, has Donald Trump ever threatened anybody with violence? That's what Chris Cuomo's doing in this clip. He's threatening to throw a guy down the stairs. One might assume that's something that could result in death. I mean, of course, it's bluster, of course. Men do this. But that's the way men are. Why pretend to be other than that? And so when you blow your top like that, it's natural. But what I'm saying is that if you don't have to bottle it all up 24/7 and pretend to be other than a dude because your career is based on it or just you've built up this reputation as a feminist man, if you don't have to bottle it all up, well, it just comes out organically in all sorts of little guy ways. And it doesn't bottle all up and then actually become toxic. It's in the same way that if you imbibe a little bit of poison every day, you can process it. But if you put a little bit of poison in you every day and you never and none of it ever gets out of you, it actually reaches a level of toxicity. And then you get this kind of it's kind of a bad analogy, but you get this toxic buildup, and that's what these guys get. This is why we're seeing such a it's like a renaissance of hate going on the left. Humans hate. That's one of the things we do, or we have negative reactions to people. We don't necessarily bottle it all up. If somebody fucks with me, excuse my language, I will mess with them back. I will. But then I forget all about it. I'm not going to hold a grudge. This is what Donald Trump does. Somebody goes after him, and he comes right back at them, and he calls them out on it. And the next day, he's outside the helicopter, and he's calling on him and giving him his time in the 90-degree heat. He doesn't hold grudges because he doesn't hold his masculinity in. He lets it process out. A moment of slight aggression comes up, boom, it's gone, and it's over with. And he moves on to the next thing. He doesn't feel that the aggression coming up within him and go, I can't be seen doing this. Bottle it all up, and then you end up carrying this around. And this is why you're seeing the left they've been in a 2-year-long orgy of hatred. They're on some level, they're so grateful to finally be able to put this out. Finally, there's somebody in the White House who gives us license to be hateful. And they're on the one hand, they're ashamed of themselves for it. But on the other hand, as long as they can keep blaming it on somebody else, they have license to do it. And they're so enjoying it. They're so enjoying it. I used to be a folk musician, now most of the folk musicians completely hate me, and I am not welcome in that group anymore because I've refused to bow to the feminist overlords over there, and that really women run that whole thing. They do. There's no money in folk music, so it's run it's run volunteer basis, and so a bunch of middle-aged women, they volunteer. They don't have any talent themselves, but they kind of like those guys with the guitars, and they have a house, and so they become these sort of house concert promoters, or they start running a concert series somewhere, or they get wrapped up in the many sort of folk festivals and conferences that happen all over the country every year, and they become sort of powerful den mother types who know all the cooler folk musicians, the ones who in that world can pass as stars. And one posted this thing the other day. It was really just a real takedown of men, and violent men and guns are what causes these shootings. Well, I left a thing that said, no, what causes these shootings, I'll paraphrase, is women who decide they would rather make money than to make good people, the absence of men in children's lives, the general devaluing of masculinity by feminists, and the postmodernist left for the last several decades. That's what is responsible for these shootings. You have a bunch of bottled up masculine anger that's gone through several channels. It's gone through movie ideation and then video game ideation, and for most, don't get me wrong, I don't think that video games cause people to go shoot people. I think that for certain types of guys, they would be happy to go shoot people if they didn't have rites of passage and the proper influence of older men and all of these things. I'm giving away my piece again here. But so for those guys, for that small group of people, they really need male guidance more than ever, and they're coming from homes where there are no males, and the males that may be there are so beaten down by feminist culture over the last several decades that they're not functioning as males anymore. So I don't know about Chris Cuomo. I mean, his dad was probably pretty woke pretty early on, running for governor and stuff like that, and so I imagine he's got a lot of this stuff bottled up inside of him, and he thinks he's going to beat it by criticizing it instead of just accepting himself as a man. And then you see him, and he's so enjoying himself in this clip. He could go on for an hour. If the guy would just challenge him back, he probably knew there was a camera going and couldn't stop himself. It's like, it's like if you have a dog, a Doberman or something like that, and you wrap a pillow or a towel. I used to have a dog who was half Doberman, and I would after I bathe her, I would wrap a bath towel around my arm and let her attack me. I would let her attack my arm, and oh my God, the joy in this animal of being able to pretend to be ripping somebody's throat out. I'd let her do that until she would just about massacred the towel and worn herself out, and she would lie on the ground and go, oh my God, I needed that. Thank you, Dad, I so needed that. That's what's happening on the left, and it's enabled by Donald Trump. And I wonder if there's not going to be a sort of a lot of people who go into the ballot box and they see Donald Trump there, and they see Kamala Harris or whoever has risen to the top and has survived the primary season and gotten the nomination, and then they just go, Donald Trump, I'm so enjoying being able to openly hate. Like, I never get to the place where I hate anybody, because when somebody pisses me off, I just tell them, just give them a piece of my mind right there on the spot and move on. I don't have to, back to this folk thing, I got to tell you one more story. There used to be this thing, right? It was before we had Facebook, and it was called a listserv. And it was sort of a kind of an online email newsletter that you could respond to. That you click on it, and then it would take you to it was kind of a chat room, and then you could put your opinion in about something. And we were getting ready to do one of these conferences. I think this was the Far West Conference, which is Folk Alliance Regional West, or SWRFA, which would be Southwest Regional Folk Alliance. Multiple things. One's called FARM, which is Folk Alliance Regional Midwest, and then there's one on the East Coast I've never been to. But it was one of those was coming up, and everyone was talking about it, and I put a topic out there like, why don't we just admit we're competing with each other? Why don't we just admit that all of this stuff that we're talking about, like, it's all about building relationships. Why don't we just say it's about who you know? Because that's what we're saying. We're just not admitting it. Why don't we just admit to each other that we are competing tooth and nail to get the best showcases, to get the best exposure, to get the most attention from the presenters who are going to be there that later may give us gigs? Why don't we just come out and say it? For the next 2 days, just this litany of just this long list of male folkies talking about how music is not about competition. I don't know who this Dave Morrison character is, but obviously he's never been in this world. We help each other. We're all here. My success is your success. Your success, therefore, is my success. So I'll do everything I can to help a brother out, or a sister. Let's not forget the sisters, or a trans person. No, the trans people hadn't gotten in the picture yet, but today that would be, and so it was so funny. And so after a couple of days go by, I go. The previous segment has been 20 male folk musicians competing to prove which one of them is the least competitive, and they just hated me because I just I just spoke the truth, and they were coming through this sort of you really. The folk music world is as competitive as anything else, and maybe even more cutthroat, because there are very few gigs that pay anything. There are very few concert circuits that you can be on, the festival circuit, for instance. There's very few prime slots for musicians. So once you get there, once you know those people, you need to know those people, and you have to be brought into the sort of secret society by one of the other people, because it's hyper competitive and everybody's just denying it 24/7. It's just as phony as the day is long, So and that's what's happening here with Chris Cuomo. I'm not going to say that this guy is who he is and all the rest of it's fake. I'm saying that within him is the ability to aggress, and finally he got something. Somebody triggered it, and all this stuff that's been, somebody calls you Fredo. It's like, what? Big deal. I've been called racist by people like Chris Cuomo about 50,000 times for never doing one racist thing. And, I can't think of, for a person who is not racist, is there a worse insult? A worse insult? Can you call somebody a worse thing? They're trying to they're trying to put you in the same bag with Hitler. They're trying to put you in the same bag with the KKK. I've very often said, "Oh yeah, that's some Hitler KKK bullshit you're spouting there, Morrison." It's like, what? What did anything I say have to do with that? I might be talking about the problems in the black community and how we as a society can help. So that more people have a escape from this sort of two culture system that ends up being a new kind of segregation between blacks and whites. How we can get away from this victim thinking that breaks us into groups that then end up competing with one another or fighting with one another, and all this nonsense that has been promulgated by the left for all this time, and that I saw from the inside, and that I know for sure was happening, and I was fighting it from within it until finally I was completely thrown out. My walk away was a little bit more like, pushed away and then finally walked away. And I'm just rambling here, so I'll let this end, but trust me, this is what's this is what's going on in America right now. It's an orgy of release of hostility, and I think they're going to be really, really sad to see Donald Trump go, because what the heck are they going to do if there are no Republicans in power? Where are they going to put this hostility? They're going to have to go back to, who am I going to hate now? I have to go back to pretending that I'm not a hateful person anymore. When I had the ability to be righteously filled with hate when Donald Trump was around, and now I'll just have to be bored and peaceful all the time, and and I'll have to start like the Daily Show used to be when Obama, they really rose to their prominence when a Republican was in the White House for 8 years, and they had to go when Obama came into office. It was like immediately they had, oh my God, they must have sat around in the writer's room going, what do we do now? We can't make fun of the first black president. So you know what they did instead? They started saying the F word. They started, at one time I counted, I was watching it, it's just like, and then everyone would laugh. As if it was bottled up, so we're going to say, oh, fuck them, and everyone laughs. And of course it would be beeped out. But you could see what they were saying. One time I counted 14 F words, an S word, and a C sucker. And so there were 16 things bleeped that night. And this is just, Jon Stewart. This is the way that they had to get laughs when they were denied to be able to slander the people in power, because the people in power were them. So they had to come up with other things, and that's when they really developed the fine art of finding any Republican anywhere who said something that could be edited to look as if he was some kind of knuckle-dragging caveman, who wanted black people in chains and women chained to the stove. So anyway, I'll let you guys go and watch for our videos. We're going in the studio tomorrow, Wednesday, and we'll be in there all day tomorrow. And we're going to hopefully get a few things in the cans. Our schedules have been not matching up very well, but we got a day to work tomorrow, so we're going to do that. So anyway, hope you're all great out there. I want to thank you, all of you again, who helped with our recent fund drive. A lot of you came online and helped with that. It was so great. We set out to make 30. Oh, excuse me. This is a carbonated beverage here in this product placement cup. So I'm burping. Our original goal was to buy 30 bicycles. These great little bicycles that they're utility bicycles for the poor people in rural Mozambique. It's a real game changer for them. It's like a little pickup truck. And the whole family, uses the things that are on the road all the time. But we had set out to buy 30 of them, and which would have been just about, they're like 115 a piece, and some of them they will accessorize in certain ways to match the family they're giving it to, and so roughly it's 115 each, and so 3,500 was going to be that we could fund 30 of them, and we ended up funding 52 of them, and our final thing, it's the page is still open. If anybody's interested, just write to me and I'll let you know. But we ended up buying 52 bicycles, so a whole bunch of people are going to get real happy, and that's because you guys came in, and of course my Facebook networks and the people I know in Los Angeles who still don't openly hate me. But things, I gotta say, are changing. They're changing. I mean, when I go out places now, there's more and more, I see more and more conservatives speaking in a normal voice. And instead of being, you can always, hey, I can spot all the conservatives here. They're the ones talking like they're making a drug deal. They may have just said something that wasn't entirely negative about Donald Trump, so they have to do it like this. But of course, with all the anti-Trump people speaking at full voice, as if theirs is the consensus opinion across this whole great land. So more and more, even in LA, I'm seeing conservatives being out front. Maybe a very small amount has to do with the fact that I had just not been apologetic for a couple of years. So people in my own circle know, well, Dave survived, so maybe I can be a little more forthcoming. And really, if the people we're going to be worried about are the left, the people who can't bring themselves to acknowledge the difference between a man and a woman and be at peace with it and have the basic common sense wisdom of the ages about how to have a woman and a man influencing each other so that the women feel secure and cared for and cherished, and the men feel valued and accepted, and they know that they've got somebody who will both bring up their sense of wanting to protect and defend and work hard and care for, without taking away their balls, frankly. So, I mean, it was all figured out until the left came along and decided, well, there's this thing called the patriarchy, and we're going to have to destroy it. And the way we're going to destroy it is we're going to destroy the family. So they've been busy with that. But to think that we would be afraid of them, these people with so little understanding of life, we're going to walk around afraid of being caught. You know, how was Austin ever allowed to happen? How was San Antonio ever allowed to happen? Where that, you know, you go to San Antonio or Austin and you'll see conservatives whispering, and you know, these people are just so brazen. They're so sort of unself-conscious that they never feel any embarrassment about their own bloviating, and they somehow talked us into being embarrassed about our own ability to speak our minds. So I believe this is coming to a change, to an end, and we have to credit that big orange man in the White House for just the sheer gutsiness of going out there every day and taking questions and doing the best he can. It's a wonder. His skin really is rhinoceros thick. It really is, and it's been a fun romp, has it not? So anyway, that's it from me. Thanks so much for watching our videos here at Blue Collar Logic. Sorry I went on so long.